Briefly worked for President Trump, and now he says Trump's supporters are a cult. Anthony Scaramucci is here with me for a chat about all of that and much more. Thanks for coming on.
Good morning. Wasn't that brief, by the way? I mean, it was 11 days in the White House, but it was about 9 months during the campaign and the transition.
That's true. You were working at Fox as a commentator, as a host, and then you had to sever that relationship to go over to the transition team.
I was hosting Wall Street Week, and so when I was announced on the transition team, I had to pull the hosting job from that.
How much has Fox News changed, do you think, in the Trump years?
I don't necessarily think that it's changed. I think that there's certain news commentators on Fox that have made a decision that they're in the tank for the president. And so whatever he's doing, they have sort of like the Fox News kaleidoscope. They'll shift this kaleidoscope to sort of make the colors paint in a way that makes the president look well. And so a couple of commentators have decided to do that. And, you know, what are you going to do? There's other commentators. Shepard Smith, as you know, left the channel. Judge Napolitano, I think they've been a little bit more balanced, a little bit more objective. But I think there's elements of a business model there, Brian, where they're galvanizing a lot of viewers. Your last panel really did describe it. The president's always felt like an outsider, and so when you're an outsider, you're susceptible to conspiracy theories, and it's one of the main reasons why he brought somebody in like Mayor Giuliani to sort of run that shadow system, because he always felt like he was outside of the system. And I think that's where a lot of the problems have come in for the president. And
when you say that Trump supporters belong to a cult, and maybe some of those Fox commentators then belong to the cult, what's your evidence? Why say a word like that?
Well, okay, so if you go to my Twitter feed, I put out the 10 things that you could look at to see if you yourself are in a cult, okay? And what are those 10 things? Someone's blatantly lying to you, and you're accepting those lies as truth. Number two, they're suggesting that they're the only person that is telling the truth. Everyone else, Brian Stelter is an example, all of CNN, MSNBC, they're all telling lies, but the cult leader himself is telling the truth. Third thing, and I think this is the most important thing, you're disaffected. There's a disaffection. The president did capitalize on that, and I actually wrote in my book, The Blue Collar President, that there is a vacuum of advocacy for white blue-collar workers over the last 3 decades, and that was malpractice by both establishment Republicans and establishment Democrats. And so he exploited that. And this is the reason why, even though his policies have failed those people, he still represents an avatar for their anger. And so they're going to stick with him until the spell breaks.
You have predicted, though, that the president is not going to last much longer, that he's going to resign or
I think there's an overwhelming cascade of evidence, and so this week will be the starting of that waterfall. It's one thing when things are behind closed doors and you're doing an investigation. It's another thing when it's open theater and you can actually see the rank lawlessness of what's gone on and the lack of constitutionality in the process with the president. And I think it's not just the Ukrainian call. There will be other elements of this story that unfold where people will say, okay, wait a minute, there's a combination of incompetence, there's a combination of a destruction of the executive branch of the United States, in addition to the lawlessness and traitorous-like behavior. So
traitorous-like behavior?
Oh, there's no question. I mean, if you're
strong word, Anthony.
Well, what word would you use? You're on the phone with the president of the Ukraine, and you're strong-arming him to have him go after your political opponent. Okay, that is, you're become a traitor to the Constitution and a traitor to the laws of the United States. So do you want to pretend that it's not traitorous behavior? We can pretend that it isn't, and we can continue to gaslight. I think one of the big problems that the American people have in this situation is we have such respect for the American presidency and the institution of that presidency. The man in that office right now is the successor to Abraham Lincoln, George Washington. And so we have a tendency to normalize something that is very abnormal. And so as he continues to gaslight, we have to call him into account for what is actually going on. No, this is full-blown traitorous activity. And once it gets exposed, then it'll be up to the American people. What I'm shocked by, as we sit here today, a couple of days after Election Day, I am shocked that Republican leadership have not disavowed this person. I'm just shocked that they would put their partisan interests and their self-preservation to stay in power over the law and the system of the United States that has led to such prosperity and such freedom for so many people.
You're talking about Mitch McConnell. You're talking about GOP leaders.
Yeah, GOP leaders. You're going to have a person above the law now. This will be the first time in 243 years where there's a group of politicians inside that are saying, you know what, we're going to allow this one person to be above the law. Every other person's been subordinate to the law for the last 243 years, which has led to this great system of liberty and this great system of prosperity. But in order for us to stay in power, somebody's clearly broken the law, clearly doing dishonest things, very un-American things, I might add. Forget about the bullying and all the style points. I'm just talking about the illegality, Brian, that if they're going to allow that to take place, I think it's going to be very dangerous for the country.
Let's take a quick break. I want to ask you about George Conway's idea. Much more in just a moment here on Reliable Sources.
Okay.